This morning, I'm pleased to have as our guest into the chronicles of the outstanding leaders in dentistry, Dr. John Zapp, the Executive Director of the American Dental Association. John, thank you so much for taking time out of what I know is a very busy schedule to come and relate some of your ideas with us this morning. As you know, this program is sponsored by the USA section of the International College of Dentists and chronicles the outstanding leaders in dentistry today. These tapes are then stored at the National Museum of Dentistry in Baltimore. Thank you, John. And the way I'd like to start is, tell me about your early days. Where are you from?
I'm from originally from Nampa, Idaho, small community in southwestern Idaho.
And what is your family, John? Brothers, sisters?
Raised with a brother and two sisters. My father was a sheep rancher. We used to run 35, 40,000 head of sheep into the mountains behind Boise, Idaho City, areas that's now a large ski resort, Bogus Basin, where I like to go out and ski when I have an opportunity. So it was a relatively small community, about 20 miles from Boise.
And the public school system was the option the only option at that point?
Public school system, although I just lived a half a block from St. Paul's Catholic School, where I went to elementary school.
Okay.
And then went to junior high and high school in Nampa, and then on to what was then Boise Junior College.
Now tell me about your dad and mom. Were their impact on your early life about dentistry? Was there anything at all that started to lead you in that direction at that point?
Well, probably what led me in the direction at that point was a dentist who lived near where we lived, just a half block in another direction, who had an extra lot next to his house, Dr. Garrity, and we used to use that as an optional football field as kids, but mostly it was a community. Dental awareness and dental health was certainly not a school item, or in many cases even a home item at that point. People were sort of resigned in the area to eventual dentures and so forth. And my parents had a lot of dental work. I spent a lot of time in Dr. Garrity's office while he was taking care of particularly my mother. And he was always a very nice person. Always bought tickets when I was selling them for the school plays and local benefits and things of that nature. And interested me generally at that point. I certainly didn't leave going into high school and on to college initially with dentistry in mind from that, but it was a very pleasant early experience.
And then you went on at that point to Boise State University.
I went to what was then Boise Junior College, became Boise State. Went there to play football and basketball and tennis.
Okay. Now, what during that period of your life sort of said to you, well, I want to be a dentist? Is there something particular? Was there a mentor other than maybe Dr. Garrity, or that led you on to Creighton?
I think that at that point I recognized that I wanted to be a professional of some type. My uncle in Boise, Idaho, was Vice President General Counsel of Morrison Knudsen, which at that point was the largest construction company in the world. Another one of my dad's brothers was a pharmacist, and yet he and another brother of my dad's, who had a business degree, had a chain of pharmacies in the Vancouver, Washington, Portland area. So, in essence, and my dad certainly was the hardest working, probably achieved the least in his life from his professional brothers, and I suppose that spurred me to some degree of thinking that I would want to be a professional myself. And how the step and how that occurred when I was in junior college to pre-dentistry over some others, I'm not really sure. But there were prominent dentists in Boise that I knew. One, Gordy Williamson, who actually was a professional ball player for the Boise Pilots, which is a C League at that time, but was somebody that I knew. So there was a variety of things, and I felt very comfortable in doing that. I did know, because I was active in college, that there were a lot of things that I wanted to do besides a professional life. And had discussed medicine with some people, and I think had decided that if a medical career with the different type of outside activities that I wanted to have probably wouldn't be the greatest idea. And so it was between that and dentistry, and I think I started out in dentistry as between the two as the one that would offer me more time to pursue additional academic careers for myself and community involvement, things of that nature.
Now tell me the time, if I recall, reading your CV, there was a time period between Boise State and going into dental school. There
was. It was called Korea.
It was called Korea. Tell us about a little bit. I know you served in the U.S. Marine Corps.
I did. I joined the Marine Corps when I was a freshman. We played in the Junior Rose Bowl when I was a freshman at Boise State. And when we came back to Pasadena, myself and a couple of my colleagues didn't really want to be drafted, and we made our own choice, and the four of us went into the Marine Corps.
And you went to Korea.
I went to Korea.
And it was not exactly a great time.
Well, I guess, I came back. And I came back in one piece. I obviously got a little battered in the process, but I came back whole. A little stint in the hospital, but I was fine. I had colleagues that didn't come back. So,
yes.
I don't say that was an entirely unpleasurable or unrewarding experience, but it was good for me personally. Marine Corps was good for me personally because I think I already had a strong work ethic. I mean, when I was growing up, we, as kids, I worked construction at nights when I was in high school and in the summertime, and we never had any downtime, so I had a strong work ethic. It was bonded, so to speak, to me in the Marine Corps, which certainly was rewarding to a strong work ethic.
Well, I can say from my experience in the military for several years that I know you were awarded the Purple Heart, and to me that's a very significant contribution. And the Marine Corps does wonderful things for people, and it certainly didn't hurt you. You look like you're doing really well, and if you contribute that to the Marine Corps, why, that's wonderful. Now, following the Marine Corps, though, then you started really getting serious about dentistry. And tell me about that period from the time the Marine Corps jumping into Creighton University.
I came back, finished school at Boise, and applied to Creighton. Of course, being from Idaho, there's no dental schools in that mountain 13 states area, so you either had to go to a state school in Washington or Oregon, or go east as far as Omaha to Creighton. There were a number of Creighton graduates in the Boise area, including Dr. Gordy Williamson that I mentioned earlier, and he encouraged me to apply to Creighton. I applied there, went back, took a look at the school, was pleased with the commitment, and was accepted, and went back and got myself through.
We're of the similar vintage, John, and tell me what dental school was like for you back in those days. I don't mean those days way back, but I know it was the late 50s and early 60s. Give me an impression of dental school then.
Well, this was not only a dental school, this was a Jesuit dental school, and so it was a very good school. I mean, Creighton, from a technical standpoint, scientific standpoint, we took all of our basic sciences in the medical school, took our gross anatomy, pharmacology, and things with the medical students at the medical school, the old medical school at that time, and so it was a very sound education. For me, I had to work, and I was determined not to come out of school with debt. So all the time I was in school, I worked a full 8 hours every night. In the summertime, I worked 2 jobs. And I graduated in 1961. I didn't have any debt. I was glad to look forward to a single occupation, but I graduated and went back to Idaho and Oregon and took the boards.
Things have changed a little bit nowadays as far as some of our dental students graduating with debt. And I know that the ADA has done some wonderful things trying to help them out in that area. And you're to be congratulated on that. Now, following that, you did some postgraduate studies. Mm-hmm. Tell me in what, John, and where?
Okay, I did actually a lot, and this was something I had planned on before and added to my career choice originally in dentistry. I practiced for a short period of time in Boise while I was looking for a location in Oregon or Washington, because I knew I wanted to be closer to places where I could do higher education, and found a small community on the Columbia River in Oregon, The Dalles, Oregon, one of the 2 cities in the world. I guess it's officially called The as a part of the name, The Hague and The Dalles. And it was a community that was very busy, enormous amount of construction at that period of time along the Columbia River, building dams and the interstate highway. So I went there. It was 80 miles from Portland and gave me an opportunity to do a number of things. And so I started back, once I settled down in the community, started to get myself established. I started commuting back and forth to Boise State University to work on a master's in political science, and also to do more postgraduate dental work, which I did at the University of Oregon and the University of Washington.
And these were days when you were in private practice, and you were in private practice primarily in Oregon.
Yes.
And I know that there were some wonderful honors that you won during that point in time. Now, don't hold back, John. Tell me that I know you were picked as the outstanding young person in the state of Oregon. And that was because, how did that come about? I know that...
Well, a lot of things in my life are serendipitous, and a lot of things I think probably relate back to the work ethic that I had then, that I still have. You know, I'm still in my office by 5 every morning. And I've stayed, I said when I got out of dental school, I thought I was glad to get out and into a single occupation. I really wasn't pleased. I mean, when I got out of school and was working just in the office, I enjoyed it very much, but I wanted to do other things. And so I became active in a variety of different things in the Dalles, including involving myself in starting the community college system in Oregon. I personally had a great admiration for and respect for junior colleges, community colleges, because, you know, I went to one in Boise. I paid for my own tuition. I was able to get through nicely. It provided me the basis for a professional career, the pursuit of a professional career. And at the same time, what I observed was a lot of kids who were classmates of mine there would not have had the opportunity for any post-high school education if it hadn't been for the opportunity of a local community college, which were relatively new at that point of time in the 50s. And so when I arrived in the Dalles, I didn't start the battle. It was going on in the community when I got there. But interestingly enough, a lot of people were getting chased off of the committees because for a variety of different reasons. It would be about a 2 mil tax, local levy in the multi-county area. And the wealthier people, the big landowners, wheat farm owners in Morrow County and so forth, and some of the others that sent their kids to the universities didn't want to pay an extra $1 or $2 to establish a community college. To them, that was like a trade school, you know, vocational school, and they thought kids should go to Portland or something for that. I felt very strongly the other way. Got deeply involved, ultimately became chairman of the committee in the mid-Columbia area, and began to do a lot of things statewide to promote the establishment of the community college system. Ultimately, it moved along, and before I went back to Washington in 1969, then practicing in Portland, I was vice chairman of the Community College Governance Commission in the state of Oregon. And in between, I did a lot of other kinds of things, a lot of historical things, a lot of different activities, political activities as well. In order to get the community college started, I had to get involved in politics. That's really what got me involved with politics initially. And that was to get a local state representative and a state senator out of office because they were voting against, in the state legislature, the authorization we needed for the establishment of it. And so I got involved with politics in the committee and so forth there. Ultimately became treasurer, finance chairman, and some other things for the state party in Oregon at the same time, which facilitated a lot of the legislative things we had to do to establish the system there.
So this was really the early days of you establishing your life's career in activism, in the opportunities that you could see other than in the single practice of dentistry to benefit the public. And so in 1969, you gave up private practice to come to Washington. Now, that in itself is an interesting thing. Anybody wants to come here. But what triggered that? I think this is very important to understand John Zapp.
Well, a lot of things. Like I say, there were a lot of things that are serendipitous, but a lot of things that came together. My pursuit of education in political science moved a little bit in this area. The fact that in establishing the community college, I spent a lot of time in California looking at their system. Spent some time with Bob Finch, who was then the Lieutenant Governor of California, and got to know him because he was such an advocate for the community college system in California. And during this time, I was very much of a statewide figure. Arthur Fleming, who became a secretary of HEW, and was chair of the Aging Commission for the White House and so forth, was then president of the University of Oregon. And we used to debate on statewide TV because he played down the community college establishment, didn't want the transferability of the liberal arts credits, and I thought that it should. So I became a very visible figure in the state. I mean, the one year that I was picked, Bob Packwood and I were picked one particular year for being two of the three outstanding people in the state. So it sort of sets that period of time. Yeah. So I had become quite a well-known figure in the state for that. I was also very active in the fluoridation movement in the state. I started the political action committee for the Oregon Dental Association during that period of time. So there were a lot of things that sort of added to a larger career.
Now, John, I know you're an HEW, Special Assistant for Dental Affairs. Give me a quick chronology of how you worked up through that and the relationship of how you then went over to the American Dental, or the American Medical, excuse me. Yeah, I wanted you home fast, but the American Medical Association.
Well, when Bob Finch left as Secretary of HEW to go back to California, and Elliot Richardson came over, he had been Undersecretary of State and took over as Secretary of the Department. We developed a very good working relationship. I had a great admiration for him and for his mind and his ability to be able to bring people together and get the best out of a lot of different points of view. He was a master at that, and one of the reasons I think that he was always so successful in the federal government. I, at that point in time, was in charge of all of the health manpower programs in HEW, which gave me an opportunity, incidentally, to go ahead and see that Creighton, my alma mater, got the last basic construction grant under the authority that existed at that time. That's when they were paying for construction of medical and dental schools. And Elliot moved me over to the legislative side, and ultimately I took over the legislation in HEW and worked very closely with him, with a lot of outside groups and so forth, and pulling together advocacy for the positions of the department at that point in time. So it was a very interesting time in government. He made a decision to leave and go to the Pentagon as Secretary of Defense. I made a decision at that point that I was considering going back for a second time to Oregon to go back into dental practice. Decided not to go to defense with him and to stay for a little while. I stayed for a little while, and Cap Weinberger came over from OMB, and as a secretary of the department, Cap and I developed a good working relationship. I stayed for about a year there, and the AMA person who related to the federal agencies, Paul Donlon, who has since passed away, knew that I was considering going back to leaving the administration and going back into practice in Oregon. Apparently told some of his managers, supervisors, whoever, and they began a process to recruit me from HEW to the AMA, which was, of course, obviously another little serendipitous turn that I had never planned on, as the director of their Department of Congressional Affairs. And I guess my feeling at that time is I would do that for a limited period of time and then go back to Oregon. Well, that limited period of time in the AMA turned out to be 19 years. Mm-hmm. But it was an interesting time where I had held a number of different positions with the American Medical Association, ended up as vice president of the AMA, as a dentist that was brought along, as you can imagine, all sorts of interesting things, because people always felt that maybe that should have been a physician making that decision, or a physician in that point, although I had excellent support from management and from the board, and it worked out very, very well. So I was there for 19 years until opportunities came along that gave me a chance to go back into dentistry with the American Dental Association.
Okay, you came home to us, John. We're delighted that happened. Tell us that sequence of how you got back in the selection process and in your present position. Give us a quick scenario of that sequence.
Well, I was again always considering going back into practice. I had stayed with the American Medical Association much longer than I thought. Had taken over the Washington office as well as responsibilities in Chicago, and was commuting a lot back and forth from Washington to Chicago for things, a day or two a week. Spent some time with a lot of different groups. The ADA actually asked me at that point if I was interested in running their Washington office, and wanted me to be interviewed for that. I had made no decision at that point, although it would have been a job of not lesser significance, but of a smaller management association responsibility had I done that. But I clearly was interested in the standpoint of the opportunity to go back to get back to dentistry, which was something I thought in management I probably would not have that opportunity once I'd spent that much time with American medicine. But at that point in time, I was married to Nancy, who interviewed me when I first came to government. She was a sort of a cub reporter, so to speak, although she wasn't a cub at that time, but she interviewed me for U.S. Medicine as a reporter, and of course now has evolved to the point to where she's editor and publisher of U.S. Medicine. And I didn't confer initially with her on whether I was going to do this or not, or either of our girls. Our oldest one's out in California, is in landscaping architect, and our youngest one's at Virginia Tech, graduating this year. But I did, as a skier, I took a prerogative of a weekend to think it over. And we have a place in Wintergreen in the Blue Ridge Mountains in Virginia, and frequently at that point in time, because I'm the only downhill skier in the family that's active, I would drive up, leave office a little early on Friday afternoon, drive up there, do night skiing, do early morning skiing on Saturday, and then come back to spend the weekend with the family. And I took this particular time to think over whether I wanted to make that significant career change, and decided that in spite of the fact that it was smaller association responsibility, I was willing to do it because I didn't want to get back into dentistry. That same weekend, Tom Ginley, who was the executive director of the ADA at that time, resigned. So all bets, so to speak, were off. Sure. And the next thing I heard from them is they wanted to know if I would be a candidate for the position of executive director, of which I was honored to be considered. And it was interesting that neither I nor anybody else that went to the board in the first slate was selected. I wasn't in the finalists that actually went to the board the first time. The outside recruiting group and the selection committee had come up with a group that the board rejected. They put together a new selection committee, used the same firm, and asked me if I would once again be willing, and I said yes. And ultimately, I was selected on Super Bowl day of Sunday in 1993 to come back to the ADA. And as I frequently tell all the employees in the Chicago office when we have all-employee forums, my first day was April Fool's Day.
Well, that's an interesting day. But for us in dentistry, and for you that run our organization, the American Dental Association, we're delighted that the selection was made. I can tell you that firsthand. Now, let's talk about a few of the issues that are facing dentistry and where you feel we may be going in, say, the year 2010. But before that, tell me some of the things that you're very proud of that you've been able to accomplish while you're there. Now, you went there in 1993. Mm-hmm. You've been there since. And I know that there's been some reorganizations. I know that we're really leading the role in technology. Give me some maybe some background little tidbits that I didn't know on that one.
Well, I think there's a lot of things. Of course, I did restructure the association considerably when I first came. Certainly it was a mass of silos that didn't communicate. And 1993 seems like it's recent, but electronically it was a long time ago. Yes. And we had databases all over the ADA, over 100 in the association, none of which could communicate with each other. And so I set a number of goals when I came, and one was to build up the Washington presence of dentistry and the advocacy apparatus, and which have been able to do. There was a perception that dentistry had a presence in Washington, but it was only a perception. They hadn't been challenged at that time. That was just before the Clinton health plan came in. And the other thing that I felt that I had to do on the same track of intensity when I first took over, other than doing some personnel restructuring, which I did, was to find a way to begin to bring the American Dental Association into the mainstream of technology. And that meant we had to change the infrastructure in the association in Chicago. We had to change its relationship to Washington and to our research center at Path-Barger out at the National Institute of Science and Technology. And we had to begin to have a presence that, in my judgment, would ultimately tie us to the member, because the associations in the future are either going to be relevant to the individual member, or they're not going to be relevant and they're not going to be members. When you and I got out of dental school, we couldn't wait to join the ADA. Right. I mean, it was not only expected, it was coveted. We wanted to get out and join our professional association. Today, the students get out and they say, why should I join? What is this professional organization going to do for me? I've got $120,000 of debts. I've got family responsibilities. Why should I join? And so what we have to do is to prove that we have a relevant association both to the graduating dentist, to the new dental member, both in their office and at home in their regular lives. Because if we don't make that relevancy, then we're not going to make the connection with dentistry and to have the ADA be the premier dental organization in the world in the future. And to me, technology was always a part of that bridge. You could see it happening. And so I felt very strong about being sure that we did that. There wasn't even a technology unit at the ADA in 1993 when I came.
Let me sort of direct your comments to, and I see this too as having been through the Navy problem with young dentists, and I don't mean they're a problem, but we as a profession need to cater somewhat to the young dentists in the licensure issues maybe and the membership issues that were friendly to them. Give me some comments of where we're going or what you see happening in that area.
Well, it used to be that they would say, wow, the American public moves around a lot. There's an address change on an average of once every 5 years. But we would think in the professional area that wasn't necessarily true. But today's new dentists and recent graduates, and even what you might call middle-aged dentists, the boomers, are a mobile population. And they see the original structure of state licensure and lack of certification in some places and being able to have reciprocity as being a barrier of a time past. And as a result of that, they look to the association to find ways to help them be mobile. It's one of the things that they feel we should be doing. And even though licensure is, as it should be, a state responsibility, there still are things that we can do to help the dentist move if they and they have good credentials, but that they have a reciprocity, an ability to have licensure by credentials of moving from one state to another. ADA's had policy on that for a long time. And there's other problems that they think, why should we take one test in one state, one in another? Well, we know there's a lot of regional boards now. but some boards still require a different written. And what we'd like to do is to see that there is a single, uniform written, not national licensure. Testing and licensure are two separate things. And sometimes people think when you're advocating a single, a uniform written exam, that you're talking about national licensure, and you're not talking about that at all. You're talking about being fair to the student so that the student that graduates in Nebraska is judged the same as the one that graduates in Ohio, because they probably are both going to end up in different parts of the country in the future because licensure by credential is increasing. And we think it makes sense, they think it makes sense, to have a more uniform exam. And so the ADA is very aggressive in that area. We've convened a lot of licensure conferences. In fact, we're having one Monday and Tuesday of next week.
In that area, when we're talking about the young dentist, of which we have to cater to somewhat to get them to join our association, which is the premier dental organization in the country or the world, how do we put the public into this? The marketplace in dentistry is changing. We have seen major changes in advertising and all these kind of things since you and I were in dental school. Where's that going, John? What's that going to do in the year 2000 and on?
Well, it's interesting because, as an example, you know, the Seal of Acceptance program, the logo that people see on their consumer dental products, and the logo, the Seal of Acceptance on professional products that we've used in our offices for years, has been an ADA program of great reverence and integrity since the 1930s. And as a result of a lot of things that have happened in the marketplace, there's been a lot of challenges to that. Attempts by international dental organizations to move in and use a logo or a seal for sale. ADA, and particularly John Zapp, has been really an opponent of that, because I think we've established a sense of integrity with the U.S. public that no other profession has. Clearly, the medicine with the Sunbeam situation destroyed anything there because they did it for profit. And the ADA actually pays for 70% of our Seal of Acceptance program, which means the seal can't be bought. I mean, the revenue we get doesn't even pay for half of the program. So yes, the more we have, the more we lose. So nobody's going to buy the seal through us. And I think that we were held up as an example to the public during the Sunbeam incident as an organization, and I think it transferred to the individual dentist, of integrity. And I think that we have to continually keep that up front. Now, it's not that we're not going to be experiencing and have to respond to things such as direct marketing of prescription or professional items. That barrier had been broken some years back. FTC did that, and this started with Rogaine and Upjohn and others going directly advertising to the public in the early 90s. We see some of it now in the dental area. And what we have to do is to be sure that it's responsible. We can't try to keep the clock from moving because it's going to move anyway. And what we have to do is to regulate it and see that it's done professionally. And we're actually involved with that with a couple of professional products now that are becoming are going to be marketed directly to the public, where we're involved with regulating the advertising because they do have a seal. So this is going to be a major change for dentistry. Some other real major changes, that are going to happen, I think, as it relates to the change from the restorative dentistry, which was the mainstay of the profession when you and I started, to prevention and to what I would call the whole body relationship of dentistry and medicine. I mean, whether you want to call it the oral systemic interface, the fact that there are now some conclusive studies as it relates to relationship between periodontal disease and diabetes, low birth weight, and a number of other things, to some studies that are almost conclusive but not concluded at this point, dealing with heart disease and a number of other factors. The public, as well as the medical community, is beginning to realize this incredible relationship between the oral cavity and the rest of the body, which in some cases can be very threatening to the individuals, and for the first time probably puts dentistry into a recognizable position of being a life or death profession, which it never was recognized as that before. But with heart attacks, diabetes, things like that, I think that type of public education, of prevention, not just prevention of dental cavities through fluoridation, sealants, and good oral health education, but of disease prevention from the oral cavity to the rest of the body is going to be one of the things that drives the profession in the next century.
When we talk about those kind of things, one of the areas which I think you've done extremely well in, and once that I can observe being here in Washington through your Washington office, is the position that dentistry has now in the national debate on health. And you've developed, or you and the Board of Trustees have developed a great grassroots program. Give me just a quick scenario of you feel our progress in that area.
Well, I feel particularly good about that because as well as technology and organization and administration, the advocacy presence was one of the next things that I wanted to fix with the association, and was able to bring in Dorothy Moss and some other good people into the Washington office, an opportunity there. And we have a excellent grassroots program now. They used to, the perception of one that existed was there before, but in reality it wasn't. And once the Clinton health care challenge, so to speak, of 93 and 94 began to occur, and we put this together, then the realization of the need for it existed, up to the point to where we clearly established dentistry. I mean, patient protection is a major piece of legislation for the Democrats, Republicans, and the White House at this point. The first pieces of patient protection legislation were developed by the American Dental Association as an effort to find an opportunity for our grassroots to be able to advocate on the managed care marketplace issue, and to where it wouldn't be a violation of antitrust or restraint of trade. You can do those things in advocacy of legislation. That's where patient protection legislation came from. And so we became very well recognized as being a leader legislatively on the Hill. Our grassroots has grown to the point to where it's around 18,000 active grassroots individuals with action team leaders in every congressional district in the country, a communication mechanism that we now have. And so we have something here that has continually raised the level of dentistry, not just legislatively, but also on the agency side. We were able to get OSHA and the Department of Labor to agree to a phone fax arrangement for OSHA inspections rather than having on-site and spontaneous or surprise type of inspections, kind of things that really bothered dentists. We were able to work with them and have enough credibility to get by that.
John, let's talk a little bit, too, about your impressions of fragmentations. We have so many people in dentistry, and what my feeling is we need the ADA to talk for us. What's the atmosphere going on now in that area?
Well, I think this is going to continually be a challenge for the American Dental Association. I think we've successfully have met it to date, but we're a small profession. Compared to larger medical and other groups, and fragmentation will destroy the ability of an organization to do what it needs to do for its members, the public, and for obviously its advocacy opportunities. By comparison, American Medical Association's market share at this point is less than 35%. Ours is well above 70% of all dentists, and when you get into the practicing dentists, it certainly is up near 80% of those who practice dentistry are members. So we have a very enviable market share. But there also are a lot of dental organizations, and as I mentioned earlier, graduates today don't automatically join. And they may begin to do what has happened in medicine. Rather than join the umbrella organization, they join their specialty. Or they can't join a county and state without joining the ADA because of the tripartite, but they can join other non-umbrella organizations, and that won't provide the services to them or to the profession. And so we have to be very careful that we don't see specialties pitted against each other wherever we can help it, and that we keep specialties from being pitted against, or other related dental groups against the ADA. And this is not an easy chore. You know, we have a governance structure in the American Dental Association. I mean, as executive director, I'm the chief administrator, but we have a governance structure that's sensitive to this, which is fortunate because it helps us. Medicine, I think, governance structure didn't recognize that, their house or their board. And they tended to chastise groups that were a little bit on their outside. And as far as I'm concerned, it's an enormous mistake, because what you do is you push out people who belong to group practice, people belong here, people belong there. They form their own organizations. They don't need to belong. And medicine suffered dramatically from that. In dentistry, it's very important that we don't label people who, as an example, belong to a DMSO as being somebody that's unethical or shouldn't be a part of the profession. They're very much a part of the profession. The thing we have to be certain of, not only to them, but to all people who treat the public, is that they're professionals and that they continue to treat in a manner that's up to the standards of which they were licensed for and trained for. And whether they happen to be and make their own professional judgments. Now, whatever administrative role that they may have in an office, from one office to another, isn't necessarily something that should cast them out or have them branded, which is what medicine did. And we can't let that happen in dentistry. We're too small to begin to brand different groups or different specialties or different related dental organizations. Don't necessarily agree with us 100% of the time. We try to push them out of the way. We can't do that. We've always got to find a way to embrace them, concentrate on our commonalities. And this is something that I spent a lot of time with the board. The board is very aware and is very sensitive to that. And from that standpoint, they're completely different than the medical boards of 10 and 15 years ago, when they chased people away instead of trying to bring them in.
Just one other area that we see here in Washington, because it's located here, the Paffenbarg Institute. And your relationship, when I say you're, the executive positions of the American Dental Association to the National Institutes of Health, and of course the Research Institute. That has been, from my observation, just a very, very favorable relationship. And I would hope that continue. Are we doing anything different there now? I know you've increased the budget, helped increase the budget for them. And,
well, we're doing a lot of things. You know, we have, of course, formed a number of things recently. We've taken our old foundation structure that we've had there for 30 years and provided a new charitable aspect, so that we would have the ADA Health Foundation become the premier dental foundation in the world. And that's our objective, and our goal is to serve clinical dentistry better, which means not just for the dentist and their environment, but for the patients. And so it's very far-reaching. Another part of that foundation is a scientific part, which encompasses the Paffenbarger Research Institute, which is located on the campus of the National Institute of Science and Technology in Gaithersburg, which is a part of the Department of Commerce. A very unique kind of thing. But this is a research entity of which ADA employees of our foundation work in conjunction on a campus of a federal entity, where inventions are and refinements are the name of the game, so to speak. We don't do validation for the seal of acceptance there, but the high-speed handpiece and bonding and other things were developed at the Paffenbarger Research. Great advances for dentistry, because we're not like the many medical institutions that have enormous pharmaceutical companies and other that are doing research in their areas for materials and things of that nature. Dentistry didn't have that, and as a result formed Paffenbarger Research some 35 or 40 years ago, and it's become this very, very unique entity that exists on the campus out there. And so it's doing really some amazing things out there now, and one of the challenges we have is to publicize it better to our members, particularly new members, to realize that it's their association that actually is doing these things. It wasn't some remote for-profit corporation, which we have good corporate partners. I don't want to appear differently in that standpoint, but this was the ADA Health Foundation to develop the high-speed handpieces and a lot of other very significant advances in dentistry that exist today.
The handpiece was developed to help with the Navy, though, too, John. Let me ask you a question. As I go around and had the opportunity through the International College to talk to young folks, the question is, Doctor, would you go into dentistry now? Would you, John?
Would I go into dentistry now? Yes. And it's interesting, and I think I would do it now. I mean, dentistry has offered me phenomenal opportunities in my lifetime. I mean, I've had a gifted career, and I've been helped by a lot of people in a lot of situations at a lot of different times. And so I'm very thankful, and certainly my dental degree was the start of that, and my dental practice was the start of that. And developed the basis for what I do now at the ADA. But if you take a look at the qualified applicants to dental schools and watch the cycles that it tends to go through, you find that now dentistry, the qualified applicant level is enormous compared to the openings. Now, there was a time 10 years ago where some of the schools were challenged on the number of qualified applicants that they had to choose from. Now they have an overabundance of them. Dentistry is viewed very well, obviously, by young people, by the fact that we have so many who are qualified that could go into anything today. They're obviously, if you're qualified to go into a dental school academically, you're qualified to do just about anything. And the fact that our applicant pool is so high per opening slot, I think, says a lot about a lot of things, including the public, the parents, the schools, the counselors, the advisors' view of dentistry and the dental profession today. I mean, enormous reflection in my mind as to how we're viewed, the fact that the applicant pool is so high when the choices are so great today.
Looking back at a very unique career, one which has got the clinical practice, it's got some extra studies, it's been in administration, not only in dentistry but in medicine. What would you change?
Well, if you've been fortunate enough to have all of the opportunities that I have, you can't look back and say I would change anything. You may want to. I mean, to me, one of my successes is focus, and never to lose focus on what you're doing or what you want to do, no matter what the obstacles are, and make the changes perhaps that you have to make to get there. And you know, if anything, I would have liked to have had the intensity of that focus even earlier in my professional career. But it's very difficult when you've had all the opportunities that I've had in all the places that I have been. I've done a lot of international things in dentistry. I've consulted the WHO through the years and worked on the first international collaboration for dentistry. So, I mean, my opportunities have really been phenomenal. And it would be very disingenuous on my part to say that I would go back and want to change any of it.
Well, there's been nobody in dentistry that I can remember, and I've been around now 40 years, that has done what you've done, John, and we appreciate it. We in the International College really appreciate you taking time, because I know how busy you are, to come and just share some ideas with us. We appreciate what you're doing at the ADA, and as you know, the International College supports 100%. The American Dental Association will continue to do that. Thank you, friend, for being with us. It's been a wonderful day.
Thank you for having me. It was an opportunity. It was mine.
Thank you, sir.